Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, the management and officials of the Responsible Fashion Summit, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Today, I would like to show you a short film on why Ajay and his team set about promoting Sri Lanka as a responsible fashion destination 2 years ago. Why we felt that the best way to showcase this fact was by holding annual summits such as this in Sri Lanka, where we could show how plastic waste, for example, collected from within the country is then converted to apparel again within Sri Lanka. And in doing so, we leave a transparent, auditable trail from a single plastic bottle collected from wherever in the country to the final garment that's produced. The customer obtains a genuinely recycled, high-quality garment using resources within one country. So please enjoy the show, and I'll come back after the show to wrap things up. Ali spoke a little bit about what Ali was referring to as well earlier in his discussion. So this shows how within a distance of just 400 kilometers from Point Pedro, deep in the north of Sri Lanka, to our recycling yarn plants in Orana, and through the fabric making and garment factories within that distance, a complete end-to-end solution can be provided. Look at the reduction in the lead times possible due to this, very important for the fashion industry. Savings from otherwise having to maintain high levels of inventory, in having to import and maintain those inventories. And then there is the carbon footprint, in not having to ship partially completed raw materials or finished goods to other destinations for finishing. This is what makes Sri Lanka a near ideal place for sourcing responsibly produced apparel. We are not aware of any other country, single location in the world that can claim this in high commercial volumes with auditable trails like what we do here. This is why at Eco Spindles, we are proud to be associated with this summit and the fashion movement. And this is just the beginning. There is more to be done, more plastic to be collected, more apparel to be made, and to spread the message. So we hope to be back 1 year from now to show you more of what we have achieved. 2 years ago, when we first had the Responsible Fashion Summit in Sri Lanka, what we showcased was just a concept. Today it is reality. And we hope to show you more the next time we meet, to talk about new products that we hope to develop, to go further in closing the loop or the cycle of recycling. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the summit.
Anush, when I talked to you and you said that in terms of your collection, that you actually here are having a problem in finding enough plastic for the work you do, and I was really surprised by that. So is it that we don't have the right kind of plastic, or is it about collection, or what is the problem?
Yes, I think, so when we spoke before, so we collect the bottles, the plastic bottles ourselves from wherever they may be in the country through a fairly extensive collection network in Sri Lanka, the PET bottles. What we are now, and then we collect quite a bit of this, around 250 tons of this every month, roughly around 20% of what Sri Lanka imports into making water and your cola bottles. So it's very large, and the challenges that we now have is going beyond that, because we are now collecting from wherever there is an organized collection network, a municipality, an urban council, a Pradesh Sabha, we get those bottles. But our problem is now going into the villages where there is no organized collection network. Most of the bottles, I think I was told today that there is a fair majority of bottles that are consumed in those villages where there is no formal collection network. Those just go into landfills, or those are just burned by some of the villages because they have a problem with garbage. So that's where our problem is today, in trying to get bottles from those rural villages.
Okay, so so when you talk about circularity, it's not just about the process, it's about who we are involving, it's about all of us being involved in this process. I'd like to ask you, kind of connect to the conversation earlier about, again, not adding new molecules. Maybe you could tell us a little bit, for example, the shoe, that how you pronounce it, life shoe, that you designed, and the thinking and design that has gone into producing something that actually can be recycled or in a different way. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Life Shoes is a project we looked at, trying to look at how can you change the whole paradigm. I mean, honestly, a lot of the efforts that we're doing is like little Band-Aids on the dam, right? And despite the scale of operations that Eco Spindles is doing, or a lot of us are doing, it's still, when you look at the scale of what is confronting us, it's massive. And a lot of times what we're doing is we're changing one aspect of the problem, but actually it's really a cultural issue. So what is manufacturing? So if we try to be as sustainable as we can, but we still use centralized manufacturing, there's still going to be some inherent losses. And if you just try to say, I'm going to make the exact same shoe, but I'm just going to make it recyclable, I'm going to end up with a more expensive shoe. If I'm going to say I'm going to make the exact same shoe, but I'm going to make the material health, I'm not going to use toluene or benzene as my adhesives, which are just hugely carcinogenic and causing all kinds of birth defects, that I'm just going to have a more expensive shoe. And in fact, if I just take on any one of those singular issues, I'm going to end up back to the same logical conclusion, because there's a lot of smart people that got us to where we are, looking at their narrow perspectives. So really, if you want to start talking about circularity, it's a cultural change. It's wearing clothes that have been worn before and being okay with it. It's looking at manufacturing being in a distributed network, not necessarily a centralized network. I think all of those things really have to change. I mean, we have a daunting, it's hard not to get depressed hearing numbers, right? And understanding someone who can be very rational and clear about what is confronting us. It's not a small issue. This is a huge issue, and we have to address it in a huge way. I mean, it took all of us, right? I mean, all 7 billion of us to kind of create the mess that we're in. It wasn't one singular project that did it. It's not going to be one singular project that gets us out of this as well. So I think we need a real systemic change here. And it starts with the way of what we're wearing, of how we're wearing it, and what we're doing. So I think there's a lot of projects. So Life Shoes was kind of an interesting way of like, can we use 3D printing for some stuff? Can we go completely adhesive free? Can we use organic cottons and try to say, if we took every single problem possible and put it into one solution, what you get, and actually you get some really interesting benefits from that.
And so it's also, for example, the design of the shoe is that you're not mixing materials, that you can take them apart separately in the recycling process. So that's the problem of, you take organic cotton and put something else into it. It's no longer, even though you've taken it, you've manufactured it out of what was originally plastic, you put something else into it, it can't now go back. So that's the kind of...
For the young designers here, design for disassembly is the #1 thing. You have to understand that. Because somehow, some way that is going to go somewhere else. And someone's going to have to deal with it. And I think not enough of us, because we don't throw our trash in our backyards, we send this place called somewhere else.
Yes.
We don't understand that.
Yeah.
But you spend some time in a recycling facility, spend some time in a landfill, and really just hang out, and it will change your life about understanding where somewhere else is.
Anush, you said 250 metric tons. What's the size of 250 metric tons? Just this amount. Is it a size? Does it fill the size of this room,
Oh,
or
much bigger.
yeah, how much more?
I don't know. I've seen the 250 tons in but I think one of the other things, some of the other things that we could be helped with also is with the packaging. So if you take Sri Lanka, for example, we only have around 2/3 of the bottles that we collect in clear form. When it comes in clear form, it can be recycled 100% because we can dye it to whatever color that the yarn needs to be in. But there is a third of it that comes in green, brown, blue, other colors. Now that limits the amount of recycling that we can do with those bottles. So I think that the packaging industry, the bottling industry can also help in this. And I know that there are certain countries in certain parts of the world that are now forming, passing law rules to say that the packaging needs to be consistent as well.
What are your next plans, Anush, for the next year? You kind of gave us some hope, that coming back to us next year with things. Anything you'd like to share? What's in the pipeline?
No, so we will try to scale our operations, go beyond Sri Lanka, go to other countries where there is this plastic problem is a big problem. So we will look at that. We will look at coming up with some new products as well, some biodegradable products that we all mentioned, things of that nature, where microplastics is a huge problem today. We are just tackling a small problem.
When you mean microplastic, what does that
So
mean?
whenever you put in a garment, a piece of clothing into a washing machine, there is a little bits of fiber that comes out and goes through the wastewater and finally goes to the oceans. Tackling that is going to be a bigger problem. So those are some of the areas that we're looking at, in trying to fix those problems.
Thank you, Anush, and thank you very much. I think in the interest of time, sadly, we do have to close this panel, but thank you very much for coming to the stage again, Ali, and sharing your stories and hope in spite of the despair, and for all the wonderful things you and Anush, in your separate areas are inventing and thinking about. Thank you very much.
My question is for Dr. Anush. Now, with the demand from all the customers, what we are seeing, so now as you mentioned, like 20% we are collecting from Sri Lanka. How can you, you just mentioned some challenges, but how can you make that other 80% to be collected and to give the demand how to cater for the demand? Is there any plan? And with for Dr. Pial, one question is like for your biodegradability product. Now even the plastic and these things collection procedures are getting this for some level. How is with your research in the other countries like US and Europe? Are they is there any proper process to collect those garments differently, like biodegradable product differently? Is it already established, or do we want to make a big effort to make it happen? So it will be really helpful to take your product to next level. Yeah.
So I think going beyond this, I don't know whether we will ever be able to get to 100%. But going beyond this, the 20% is going to be that it will take that much longer. So some of the things that we are doing now is we are working with the municipalities, trying to improve their efficiency levels. Most of these municipalities in the Western Province as well as outside Colombo, most of them have good equipment that have been given to them, bathing machines and so on by various NGOs. Quite a few of them are not using these things. So we are working with each of these municipalities, urban councils, in getting their collections and their sorting methods much more efficient. But going into those rural areas, I mentioned, into the rural villages, our approach there is to work with schools, work with bank branches. Because the bank branches, you get, in quite
part of my hair first so I can really
rural area schools. So we will work through those organizations. You know, school, for example, if you have your household waste, if the school children could bring the household waste to the school, we could collect the plastic waste from the schools and then have it transported to our washing plants. Bank branches, the same thing. You know, we'll have collection points in those branches, and then transport those bottles, to our washing plants. But those will take a bit longer to do. But those are some of the things that we've got going now.
It becomes so difficult to have reverse logistics that to me is very daunting. Those are the most daunting places just because transportation is so difficult to organize. I think Sri Lanka, what it has going for it is, you know, a really concise landmass and also a spirit of cooperation. So I don't know if there's any politicians here, but from my perspective, I think it's doing really, really well. In fact, a lot of the plastic that you're talking about isn't even generated here, right? So it's almost like a positive. It's taking stuff from India or from Indonesia in a lot of cases. I even found bottles in Arabic on the shores here. So it's doing its part, and I think it's in that way. I think it's doing really well. Even to be the best in this isn't enough.